good evening, and welcome to Sky Night. The moon is waxing gibbous with 67% illumination. It is rising in the afternoon and shining most of the night in Ophiuchus. Enable captions in your language to see local observing cities and times. Join us now for a guided tour of the entire sky visible tonight. We begin our evening with Venus halfway up the southern sky, followed by the moon near Antares low in the western sky, while the ring nebula, Albireo, Altair, and Deneb shine almost straight overhead and high in the southern sky. As the night deepens, we turn to the Iris Nebula high in the northern sky, watch for southern Delta Aquariids meteors halfway up the southern sky, and spot Mars near the eastern horizon. Toward morning, the Andromeda Galaxy and Saturn dominate the sky almost straight overhead and halfway up the southern sky, joined by the Triangulum Galaxy, Jupiter, Polaris, and the Perseids meteors. Our tour concludes with a series of moon crossings by satellites. Venus shines as a dazzling silver-white point halfway up the southern sky, outshining every star and dominating the evening view despite bright twilight. Catch the planet before it sets at 8:50 in the evening in London, at 8:15 in the evening in New York, and at 8 in the evening in Los Angeles, when it reaches its greatest altitude for the night. Long before anyone could point a telescope at it, the bright wanderer we now call Venus was already a living god in the ancient world. In Sumerian temples, the planet was identified with the goddess Inanna, later called Ishtar by the Akkadians, a deity of love, war, and rebirth, and her famous myth of descending into the underworld mirrors the planet's three-day disappearance between its morning and evening appearances. Across the east, Chinese astronomers gave the same object the name Jinxing, the golden star, of the metal element, using its steady shine to mark the calendar and even to predict the start of the planting season. Look low in the western sky to spot the waxing gibbous moon passing close to the bright star Antares, with both setting soon under twilight glare. The earliest last chance to catch the pair before it sets belongs to New York at 8:15 in the evening, with London following in between at 8:50 in the evening, while Los Angeles waits until 8 in the evening for its final view before the object disappears. This night's deep sky object is the Ring Nebula, a famous greenish ring in Lyra that requires a telescope to see. Aim your instrument midway between the two southern stars of the little parallelogram below brilliant Vega, almost straight overhead. The nebula culminates in Los Angeles, New York, and London together around 9:50 in the evening. The Ring Nebula is still growing, its glowing shell rushing outward at roughly 20 to 30 kilometers per second, which means its gas was cast off only about 7,000 years ago. Albireo is a golden yellow star marking the foot of the Northern Cross, a prominent asterism within the constellation Cygnus. Look high in the southern sky to find this object, which appears as a single point of light to the naked eye. A small telescope will split it into a stunning pair of gold and blue stars. In Los Angeles, New York, and London, this star reaches its greatest altitude together around 10:25 in the evening. Albireo shines at about magnitude 3, making it the fifth brightest star in Cygnus, and its light travels roughly 400 light-years across space to reach us. Altair gleams as a white star high in the southern sky, easily identified as the bright corner of the summer triangle flanked by two fainter companion stars. Around 10:45 in the evening, this star culminates in Los Angeles, New York, and London. According to legend, once a year, on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, a flock of magpies forms a bridge over the Milky Way. This allows Niulong and Xinu to meet for a single day. Deneb is a blue-white star visible to the naked eye, almost straight overhead. It marks the luminous top of the Northern Cross asterism within the constellation Cygnus and forms one corner of the summer triangle. This star remains above the horizon all night and reaches its highest point in Los Angeles, New York, and London together around 11:35 in the evening. Deneb is the 19th brightest star in the night sky. Nevertheless, in terms of actual radiative power, It belongs to the absolute elite among all known stars in our galaxy. Featured tonight is the Iris Nebula, a subtle blue reflection nebula in Cepheus visible only through a telescope. Find it high in the northern sky between the star Alderman and the house-shaped pattern of the constellation. In Los Angeles, New York, and London, the nebula stays above the horizon all night and culminates together around 11:55 in the evening. Visually, it is a disappointment, and photographically, it is a showpiece, which makes it a perfect illustration of how much of modern astronomy the eye simply cannot do. The Southern Delta Aquariids meteor shower is active now, though fading, sending about 3 meteors per hour streaking from a radiant halfway up the southern sky in Aquarius. Around 1:35 in the morning, the radiant reaches its greatest altitude in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Mars rises tonight from the eastern horizon as an orange-red point. This planet is visible to the naked eye, appearing low in the east as it ascends. The planet rises first in London at 1:14 in the morning, then in New York at 1:53 in the morning, and finally in Los Angeles at 2:09 in the morning. In the Star Trek universe, Starfleet's main shipbuilding facility, the Utopia Planitia Fleet Yards, seen throughout The Next Generation, Voyager, and Picard, orbits Mars, named after the real Martian plane where NASA's Viking 2 lander touched down in 1976. We now turn to the crossings of Phobos and Deimos across the disk of Mars. Phobos makes its first crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 52 minutes. In Los Angeles, this transit occurs between 12:39 in the afternoon and 1:31 in the afternoon while Mars is above the horizon, and in New York it happens between 3:39 in the afternoon and 4:31 in the afternoon as Mars stands above the horizon, whereas in London Mars is below the horizon. Deimos completes its sole crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, a passage taking 61 minutes. This event takes place in London between 1:47 in the morning and 2:48 in the morning with Mars above the horizon, while in Los Angeles and New York Mars is below the horizon. Phobos makes its next crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 52 minutes. This transit occurs in London between 4:18 in the morning and 5:10 in the morning as Mars is above the horizon, whereas in Los Angeles and New York Mars is below the horizon. Phobos makes its third crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, a transit lasting 52 minutes. In Los Angeles, this crossing happens between 3:58 in the morning and 4:50 in the morning with Mars above the horizon. In New York, it takes place between 6:58 in the morning and 7:50 in the morning as Mars stands above the horizon, and in London it occurs between 11:58 in the morning and 12:50 in the afternoon while Mars is above the horizon. The Andromeda Galaxy is the farthest object visible to the naked eye, appearing as a pale oval smudge almost straight overhead, located by hopping from the corner of the Great Square of Pegasus along 2 stars toward the Andromeda chain. The galaxy remains above the horizon all night and reaches its highest point in Los Angeles, New York, and London together around 3:40 in the morning. The Andromeda Galaxy is on a collision course with the Milky Way, and in approximately 4.5 billion years, the two galaxies will merge to create a single elliptical galaxy that astronomers have nicknamed Milkomeda. In catalogs, it is listed as M31. Saturn glows as a steady golden point halfway up the southern sky in Pisces, distinguished from stars by its calm, unblinking light. Around 3:50 in the morning, the planet culminates in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Saturn's magnetic field is remarkably aligned with its rotational axis, unlike Earth's tilted magnetic field, making Saturn one of the few planets with such perfect magnetic alignment. The Triangulum Galaxy is a broad, ghostly globe best seen with binoculars under dark skies. Look high in the southern sky between the Andromeda Galaxy and the small triangular pattern of stars in Triangulum. The galaxy reaches its greatest altitude in Los Angeles, New York, and London together around 4:30 in the morning. In 2019, the Hubble Space Telescope combined 54 exposures into a portrait of the Triangulum Galaxy, containing about 665 million pixels, at the time the second-largest image Hubble had ever assembled, surpassed only by its panorama of Andromeda. Jupiter emerges near the eastern horizon as a bright, rising planet, marking its entry into the night sky. In London, the planet rises at 4:17 in the morning, while New York and Los Angeles follow at 4:43 in the morning and 4:54 in the morning, respectively. Jupiter's moon Europa hides a salty ocean beneath its icy crust, a world so tantalizing that Arthur C. Clarke's novel, 2010, Odyssey 2 warns, all these worlds are yours except Europa. We now turn to the crossings of Io across the disk of Jupiter. Io makes its first crossing across the apparent disk of Jupiter, a transit lasting 141 minutes. Jupiter is below the horizon in Los Angeles, and Jupiter is in daylight or twilight in New York and London. Polaris, one of the 50 brightest stars, sits high in the northern sky within Ursa Minor and is visible to the naked eye. To find it, locate the pointer stars of the Big Dipper, which are two bright stars forming the outer edge of the Dipper's bowl, and follow the line they create directly to this steady star. Around 5:20 in the morning, this star reaches its highest point in Los Angeles, New York, and London, where it remains above the horizon all night. Polaris has been used for navigational purposes since at least late antiquity. The 5th century Greek writer Stobaeus described it as a star, always visible in the night sky. The Perseids meteors are active on this night, though the shower is 9 days past its peak and fading. Face high in the northern sky to find the radiant point within the constellation Perseus, from which the meteors appear to streak away. This object is visible to the naked eye, so simply let your gaze wander slightly away from the radiant to spot the longest trails. The radiant remains above the horizon all night and culminates in Los Angeles and New York together around 5:45 in the morning, while in London it also stays up all night and reaches its greatest altitude at 5:15 in the morning. Tonight, satellites will cross the moon's disk 15 times, with 10 of those tracks passing close to towns and settlements, and 6 of those are presented here. Tiangong Space Station makes the first crossing of the night. Its ground path begins over the open Atlantic at 7:53 in the evening and ends east of El Minya at 12:02 after midnight. For an observer standing on the narrow path, the crossing of the disk takes only about 1 second. The second of the night sees Tiangong Space Station make its crossing. Its ground path begins over the open Indian Ocean at 8:42 in the evening and ends near Puching at 11:20 in the evening. The third of the night sees Tiangong Space Station make its crossing. Its ground path begins west of Mbandaka at 8:49 in the evening and ends near Bandar-e-Janavi at 11:27 in the evening. The fourth of the night sees Tiangong Space Station make its crossing. Its ground path begins near Quito at 8:58 in the evening and ends over the open Atlantic at 11:37 in the evening. The fifth of the night sees Tiangong Space Station make its crossing. Its ground path begins near Garissa at 9:16 in the evening and ends near Suratgarh at 11:55 in the evening. The sixth of the night sees Tiangong Space Station make its crossing. Its ground path begins over the open Indian Ocean at 9:44 in the evening and ends near Tinsukia at 10:22 in the evening. That's all for tonight. Come back tomorrow for your next sky guide and clear skies.